Plush for the plush god, orb for the orb throne. Corn cares not from where the money flows, only that it flows.
So use code DRAKE10 for 10% off your order. Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. Longtime listeners know that I got an obscene amount of niche interests. Zoology, competitive marksmanship, bodybuilding, fossil hunting, role-playing games, sculpting, digital art, crying in the shower, macaroni art, I get around. But while my list of hobbies is full, that tends to leave my wallet pathetically empty. And none of these hobbies leave my wallet emptier than Warhammer. That's right, I'm a filthy Warhammer fan. I love me some Spacebug Xenomorph knockoffs with the munchies. Them Tyranids just scratch that itch for me. But I've been feeling the pull of chaos, dear listener. There's just something about injecting demonic steroids and putting your head through a wall at the slightest inconvenience that just really speaks to me. I swear to God, I will start up the Draco F page if it means World Eaters start showing up in my P.O. box. I will also accept more Tyranids because I only need 2 more Carnifexes to run the full brood, and that is certain to fix all my problems, right? So, in the spirit of my fall to chaos, I wanted to do a bit of a thematic episode today. That's right, I got 4 horror stories for you today, each inspired by one of the 4 chaos gods. Up first, we got the man of the hour, the blood god himself, and my recent flight of fancy, Khorne, the god of war, wrath, blood, murder, and strength. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know if wrath is the emotion I want in my healthy D&D game. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG horror stories. Enjoy. Story number 1 comes from Reddit user TacticalPixie1138 and is titled D&D Dust-Up Ended With Me in the Hospital. So I'm typing this up on my way home from the hospital. Tonight was D&D night for us at the LGS. We were playing at our usual table next to the shelves where there are painted minis and terrain for all systems. Mostly Warhammer 40k minis and terrain with some D&D tossed in for good measure. The store lets people sell them on commission, with the store taking a small cut. Another table was getting a little loud, and we asked them if they could quiet down. Their DM had no problems with that, since we were polite, and asked the exuberant player to dial it back down a bit. Things got loud after a while. They looked like they were getting into a boss battle, and the loud player was getting louder. We paid it little mind, as we were in our own combat at the time. Nothing fancy, just some incidental mobs in the dungeon. It got louder and quieter in a cycle, and we thought little of it until I stood up to move my mini on the map to get a better position to fireball without hitting my own crew when we heard, "You motherfucker!" I looked over just in time to see the DM getting linebackered by the loud player, and they were both falling towards me. Before I could move, they ran me right into the shelves. Store staff intervened, police and medical were called, first aid was administered, I got a gnarly cut on my arm, a bruise on my face, and my elbow hurt a lot, and statements were made. Yes, I did press charges. The cut was treated with butterfly closures, and the elbow suffered a non-displaced radial head fracture, which, thankfully, will not need a cast. Then I'll be in a sling for a few days. Then once the orthopedist looks at it, I'll be put on range of motion exercises for the next 2 months. I'm also going to look into suing the guy, since I'm gonna be on short-term disability since I can't do my job as a paramedic with a gimpy arm. The reason that the loud guy snapped? I learned later that his character was downed, not killed, when the dice rolls failed him. Other than that, I don't know the final results of things. I'll find out more next game night. I imagine that the loud guy is banned from the store at the very least, and that he's going to have to pay for the damages to the shelves and the minis that were on commission. End of story. Damn. Blood for the blood god, indeed. Weird aside, but if your first thought after coming home from the hospital is time to tell Reddit, then you may have a bit of a dependency. Just saying. This story does kind of sound like a skill issue, though. When one table at a hobby store starts getting too loud, it's your job to start screaming louder to assert dominance. That's what I do, and I've never been put through a shelving unit. It could also be because I don't play RPGs at hobby stores, or interact with other people. Nah, it's definitely because I'm too alpha. All jokes aside, dude, come on. If you can't handle the idea of your OC getting a boo-boo in a game of adult make-believe without getting physically violent, then I doubt even Gorn wants you to fight for him because that's just kinda pathetic. This is another reason why I'm a huge advocate for nerds to embrace the gym life. Physical altercations like this one are much less likely to happen when everyone at the table is built like a brick shithouse. Okay, now for real jokes and broisms aside, there is not much OP could have done here in terms of prevention, because people can be unpredictable, and there isn't much you can really do to make yourself 100% immune to that short of just never going outside, which just drives more people onto the internet to live their lives vicariously through influencers and echo chambers, and that's a whole can of worms I'm not gonna touch right now, because last week's video has me burnt out on controversial topics for at least the end of this recording sesh. Yeah, this dumbass 100% deserves to have charges pressed against him, because I got a sneaking suspicion that this guy's never had to face consequences for his shitty behavior, and it can only really do him some good. You don't deserve to lose money and time on the job because of someone else's temper tantrum. Although you could have just pocketed some of the Warhammer minis while you were flying through the case. You could resell them and you'd net a bigger payout than suing someone ever could. Okay, next up we got the Changer of Ways, the Lord of Entropy, lover of birds, and overall kind of a dick, Tzeentch, the god of change, sorcery, knowledge, lies, and trickery. Oh boy, it's about to get convoluted. Our second story comes from Reddit user The Yondant and is titled, How the DM Tried to Turn Me into the BBEG Against My Will. This was one of my first times ever playing D&D. 5e specifically, but not my actual first time. The cast. DM, a good storyteller, but had some distinct ideas about what D&D should be. Me, lawful evil paladin of unnamed dark gods, cordial and pleasant at face value, darkly sadistic and manipulative in reality. Yes, he was basically Lorgar from 40k, face tattoos included, sue me GW. Careful OP, GW is so shitty they just might. Cleric. The only other newbie in the group, playing a neutral good cleric. A little stereotypical, super nice young girl that always saw the best in people and was a little ray of sunshine, yada yada yada. Great at role-playing though. She did get confused here and there about the particular rules and mechanics on occasion. Warlock, fighter, ranger, rogue. Not super important to the goings-on of this campaign, they were decent players. But there is one important fact. All of them were either true neutral, chaotic neutral, or lawful neutral. In other words, sitting in the gray middle area of me and the cleric. So, first session. One of the first things we do, as agreed, is tell each other about what our characters are, or at least what they appear to be to everyone else. Since we all agreed on the sanctity of out-of-character knowledge not being used by the characters without reason, I told them all the truth of my character. Everyone agreed that it would be really interesting to have a naive good cleric and a corrupting evil paladin fighting for control of the party. Skip a couple of months. The campaign is pretty fun, if a little lacking in originality. A king had hired us to track down and slay a lich that was plaguing and terrorizing the land with armies of undeath. But the dynamic soon became apparent. My paladin was pushing the party to be increasingly bloodthirsty and merciless, often saying that the souls of our foes were damned and that they were irredeemable, while the cleric tried to have cultists spared and seek retribution, and pleaded the party to do the same. Eventually, the cleric found out about who my gods were and my alignment. During downtime, the cleric and my paladin met on a balcony and, mostly out of character dislike of PvP, had a small chat, which culminated in an agreement. I would do all in my power to turn the party to my side, and cleric the same. We would not take violence or sabotage each other directly, as this was a test of their souls, their character. Mostly, this was an agreement between players, again, to prevent PvP, despite however this would end up going down. The first red flag was when the DM voiced his disappointment, telling us that there's no reasons our characters should not have attacked each other on sight. Cleric.
My character doesn't like attacking people she knows, and still thinks that he can be saved.
Me. Mine likes to corrupt more than anything, and would prefer seeing her revoke her gods over killing her. The DM clearly is not happy, but does relent. The game continues, the tug-of-war within the party growing more and more, and I start noticing how even my failed rolls to corrupt NPCs to my side start working. Soon enough, I elevate my faith from some underground cult to a state religion. I honestly get a little upset at this. It's clear that the DM is fudging rolls in my favor, throwing the balance of power in my favor as I suddenly am crowned with the Grand Cardinal of my faith. with a technical army of followers and a literal army of fanatics. I don't blame them, but when the party started more openly siding with the cleric to balance it out, I admit it did kinda hurt. They thought me and the DM were in league with each other. I tell the DM that I didn't like the blatant favoritism and told him to back it up a bit. He feigned ignorance and refused to acknowledge the problem. This goes on for a while, and by now it is obvious the DM is trying to drive a schism between me and the party, giving me unholy magical equipment and even artifacts relating to my dark faith. While the party were given nothing of the sort and had to rely on teamwork to match me, the sheer powerhouse that I had become. It got so bad that I forgot modifiers and outright refused to use some artifacts just so I didn't end up becoming a shitty Mary Sue and ruin it for the rest of the party. This all came at a head at the end of the campaign. As we confronted the Lich, we began to battle, and even I took a small band of my NPC followers to use as meat shields and helpers, because if I was going to be stuck with these sheeple, I was going to use them, goddammit. The fight is harder than nails, and all but one of the NPCs are wiped out. The Warlock is unconscious, and the Cleric is almost out of spell slots. Suddenly, the Lich looks at me and casts Banishment on me. I'm about to roll a saving throw, but the DM tells me that it's unavoidable because this was some kind of uber banishment with infinite duration and no saving throws. I'm more than a little bit pissed right the f off, and the whole group continues to the entire second half of the fight while glancing at me awkwardly as my last followers flee back into the city. After the fight is finished, the party begins divvying up the loot, again without me there. And I get saved by my followers, who happen to know the exact one counterspell and returns me to the material world. There I find out that the master plan is in action, and my cult was enacting my plot to take over the kingdom and bring the dark gods into the world. Of course, I never had a plan like that. The extent of my intentions as a character being to spread my faith far and wide, so all may know the glory of my dark gods. And this is where the finale truly lies. As the city burns around me, I am suddenly overcome with immense unholy power, giving me a massive stat, AC, and proficiency bonus. And the DM even gives me f***ing legendary resistances. I am now the big bad evil guy against my will. The party returns to the city to see it in flames, cultists running around killing people, demons among them, and the only building untouched being my giant cathedral, where the DM just straight up told them,
You feel the paladin residing inside, having revealed his true evil.
I'm just kinda in shock at this point, a mix of absolutely pissed and in denial. This was never what I wanted and not what I wanted my character to become. My turn consists of directing my minions to stop the heroes while I'm forced to sit around in my cathedral just waiting to be killed. Of course, I decide that I wasn't having any of that shit. When my former party finally gets to the cathedral after marching through suspiciously empty streets, I cut off the DM and describe the scene. The cathedral hall is practically carpeted in corpses, all of the cultists having been butchered to a man, and me sitting alone at the altar. You can see that the DM is particularly giddy, ready for everyone to start rolling initiative, but f*** that shit. I didn't level my charisma for a spell save DC, I leveled it to talk. So, we talked. My character decrying the tragedy around us as the failing of the ignorant and idiotic, a perversion of my intentions. Seeing the DM's face go red at that was pretty nice. The cleric told me to call off the demonic invasion, and that I still could do good. It was around this time that the DM blew up. He starts yelling at us and begins loudly rolling initiative for us. Suddenly, I'm no longer in control of my own character, and he's attacking. The fight is an absolute shit show, and I'm just glad the party had a long rest between killing the Lich and fighting me. Otherwise, it would have been a slaughter. Still, the Warlock died, the fighter was unconscious, and the rogue was now permanently missing an arm. But they had pushed me into unconsciousness, and the DM described the unholy energy fleeing my body like a vortex, leaving me completely vulnerable. And the cleric, bless her heart, used her last 2 spell slots. She cast Protection from Evil on my unconscious body, and then used her last slot to heal me. The DM then describes how I grab the cleric and snap her neck. Cleric:
No, he doesn't. The evil spirit that was obviously possessing him had left his body and can't come back because of the protection.
DM:
What? No, you're evil, so you kill her.
Me? Obviously not. After she even went out of her way to save my life from the darkness.
The DM just explodes, shouting and yelling incoherently before trying to kick us out, saying that we were ruining the game for everyone else by undermining his twist villain. A twist villain he made without the villain's approval or even knowing, mind you. Except this wasn't his house. It was the Warlock's. The Warlock then stands up and tells the DM to get out and never come back. In a fit, the DM leaves, and while I wish I could say I never saw him again, I sadly did. Our next campaign was DM'd by the Warlock's player, and two of the NPCs were Cleric and Paladin, who had both lost almost all of their powers after the Cleric used all her power to save Paladin's soul from damnation. Honestly, at the end of the day, I just don't know why the DM didn't even try to pass this by me first, and instead just tried to decide what my character was doing without any input from me. I know there are a lot worse DMs out there, and the campaign was genuinely fun for the most part. I'm just upset about how it had to end. End of story. Aha! Just as planned! Yeah, I know Lorgar's a simp for all the Chaos Gods, but this story really screams Tzeentch to me, since he's all about turning you into the villain of your own story with or without your approval. I think this story really illustrates how a wide swath of the D&D community misunderstands the evil side of the alignment chart. I know a lot of people advocate for the removal of the alignment chart entirely, with the main argument being that morality is subjective, but I personally don't subscribe to that. I think the alignment chart is a pretty decent tool to help keep your character's actions consistent with their morals. I personally love playing evil characters because I've always found villains to be so much more interesting than heroes. However, just because your character is the villain of someone's story does not mean they have to be the villain of the party's story. See, a lot of people see the word evil and immediately associate it with disruptive, which is definitely not the case. You can be a genuinely shitty person and have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. A good chunk of the people with the word politician in their job description probably fall on the evil side of the alignment chart. And that's not even a controversial statement for anyone with more than 2 wrinkles in their brain. If you had Richard Nixon in your party, it's not like you'd expect him to run around and start snapping necks. In fact, Tricky Dick would probably also be pretty uncomfortable with a lich taking over because the undead can't pay taxes. Evil can exist within normalcy, which is really what makes it unnerving, because evil does not just sit there cackling and rubbing its hands together like a Saturday morning cartoon villain, and very rarely does it actually fit the cartoonish caricature that people have in their heads. When that insurance CEO got gifted the ultimate claim denial when the younger of the 2 Mario brothers came at him with a remote hole puncher, I didn't see too many tears being shed. So obviously people can understand the idea of evil being high functioning on some level. So yeah, DMs. Just because one of your players is attempting to play an evil character is not permission for you to hijack their game experience and twist their character's motivations and personality to fit your Tzeentchian desires. And players, try giving being bad a try, because it can be so good. Just make sure you're not being evil to the actual players at the table, because then that's just gonna get you a smack to the back of the head, and we've already covered Khorne. Now we come to the Great Corruptor, the Plague Father, the Lord of Pestilence, Grandfather Nurgle, the god of disease, rot, despair, and death. Which sounds cool, until you realize that most of Nurgle's champions in our world are just the smellier side of the Magic the Gathering fanbase. Yeah, if you're planning on eating while listening to this next one, I suggest you not do that. Our third story comes from Reddit user the Mega Man TT and is titled Drunk Player Covers the Bathroom in Poop After Dying in-game. This story is somewhat bizarre because it really felt like it came out of nowhere. There were about 4 of us guys, and we were all friends to some degree. Some of us are closer to others, but we really all enjoyed each other's company, went out for drinks, and played games together. Speaking of games, a couple months ago we all decided to have a D&D game at the DM's house, since it was the largest childless house in our group. His wife ended up playing too. For like 99% of the campaign, everything was good. Our characters were fun, the world was immersive, and the villains were tough. This was until about a month ago. We were having a Saturday get-together where we would basically just unwind with some beer, D&D, and movies. The soon-to-be that guy was playing a wizard as the party entered an ancient cave/dungeon and reached a magic item at the end of a room. There was a chasm that was separating us from the item. Before we can get it, the cave/dungeon started collapsing due to an evil spell that one of us accidentally triggered. All of us decided that it wasn't worth risking a TPK over a suspicious magic item. My detect good and evil spell heavily implied that this magic item was evil. All of us except the soon-to-be that guy, who decided to waste his last spell slot teleporting across the chasm to get the magic item with 4 HP, because he was convinced that the DM was trying to trick us. Well, it turns out I was right, and it was a mimic. A talking mimic that was working for the BBEG. The mimic got a surprise round and missed, so the wizard decided to flee. Fortunately for him, the mimic failed the opportunity attack as well. So as the rubble was falling, the wizard attempts to jump and grab a stalactite, so the DM had him roll an athletics check. And he rolled a nat 1. So the stalactite fell into the abyss along with the wizard, which obviously killed him. The wizard then says,
"No death saves,"
in a confrontational tone, so the DM says, "Bro, you rolled a nat 1 and fell into an abyss that led to the Underdark at 4 HP. You can't death save your way out of that." Wizard then claims that the DM just made up the whole Underdark chasm in order to kill him and accuses the DM of having a
DM versus the party mentality.
He then drunkenly decided to calculate the max height that a chasm like that could be, and that he couldn't have taken enough damage to negate death saves. His math was painfully bad, and his premise was flawed as, again, he fell into the fucking Underdark, not a regular cave floor. He then tried to argue that if he has to die, then he should be able to come back as a more powerful white wizard, like Gandalf, because the wizard class is based on Lord of the Rings wizards. As his arguments kept failing and he was getting angrier and more argumentative, the DM basically just laid down the law and basically said, "Look, your character is dead. End of discussion, so roll up a new one." He then sat down and said,
Fine.
as he sat there pouting and slowly coming up with a new character as the rest of us dodged collapsing rubble and rocks and barely escaped the caves with our lives. The former wizard didn't get a chance to finish the character before the session ended. As we talked a bit after the session about how wild it was and anticipated next week, he just kept sitting there silently pouting before he got up to use the bathroom. We kept talking and drinking our beers as the subject veered off to anime and other nerdy topics. We chilled for about 20 minutes before we heard him coming out of the bathroom. He opens the door to leave the house. DM asks if he's okay, and he just abruptly says,
I'm fine. My Uber's here. Bye.
before slamming the door. We just figured he just needed some time to cool off. DM said that he would talk with him tomorrow, so we just continued on having fun for the next 10 minutes as we started getting ready for the movie. As DM and his wife were preparing the popcorn, we, the players, started noticing a really bad smell coming from the bathroom. We ignored it till it got to the point where DM's wife noticed and complained, so DM checked it out and started yelling and cursing. We all get up to check it out, and it is honestly the most disgusting thing I have ever experienced in all my life. Poop was smeared all over the floor, the walls, and the mirror. There was a turd in the sink, and he looked like he wrote the words "F*** you" in poop that he had clearly smeared on the wall. Although, to be fair, the writing was not very clear, obviously. We were all shocked, and the DM and his wife were pissed. DM called the former wizard to basically cuss him out and say that he was no longer welcome at his table or in his house. He had tears in his eyes while making this call, as the rest of us basically just began grabbing cleaning supplies to help him clean it all up. It was gross, but we got it cleaned up in about half an hour. We all took showers afterwards, and by then we all ended up watching the movies in order to not let this be our memory of what was otherwise a great night. Plus, we were all a bit buzzed and didn't want to drive. The next day, the former wizard called me to ask me to talk to the DM and get him to let him play again. But I refused and told him that he really hurt the DM. So he tried to make me out to be a shitty friend and whatnot, so I just shut his manipulative bullshit down and said, fine, then I guess we have no reason to talk to each other if that's how you feel. And I hung up. None of us heard from him again. TLDR. A drunk player gets angry when his wizard dies after making a risky move to get a magic item. He decides to get revenge by shitting on the DM's bathroom floor, smearing it on the walls, and taking a dump at the sink. He was subsequently banished from the DM's house. End of story. Hey God, it's me. Please bless me with never having to suffer a person simultaneously so spiteful and stupid that they would shit on my walls. And if I must, please grant me friends who are so real that they would help me clean it up. And if not, please grant me a swift and merciful death instead. Dude, next time someone tries to argue that weed is more harmful than alcohol, I'm gonna show them this story. Because I've never heard of stoners getting so high that they think that an appropriate reaction to a character death is to go and violate international laws against biological warfare. My God! I will say, what homie lacks in critical thinking skills, he makes up for in confidence. In what world would you ever expect to be invited back after pulling that shit? OP was way too nice in that final phone call, and that ended up with him cutting off the wizard for life. I'd be too busy planning my campaign to run for president so I could live in a world where I can launch drone strikes at your house. Are you kidding me? Homie heard he couldn't come back as Gandalf the White, so he decided to come back as Gandalf the Brown. Homie heard the DM tell him that shit happens and he took it literally. Homie couldn't write stuff in his spellbook anymore, so he decided to start using your walls. Homie heard the word potty training when he was 4 and interpreted it as training yourself to do it really good, like he was a degenerate version of Goku. Okay, I'm done now, but damn, dude. Say what you will about us paladin mains, but we've never shat in a sink to spite a DM, and that's our 1 gold star. I didn't think I needed to, but I guess I gotta add, don't poop in my sink as a boundary to discuss in session 0, so thanks for unlocking that fear, OP. Well, hopefully we can move on to something a bit more tasteful. Let me check my notes real quick to see what Chaos God comes next. Ah, crap. Finally, we come to the Chaos God I'm sure you've all been dreading. The Prince of Pleasure, the Lord of Excess, she who thirsts, Slanesh. The god of excess, lust, hedonism, self-indulgence, and arrogance. Prepare yourselves, because standing before us is the metaphysical embodiment of Reddit. But to those of us who touch grass, Slanesh is basically Warhammer's god of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But drugs and rock and roll only make D&D better, so that can only leave one thing that this last story could be about. Our fourth and final story comes from Reddit user Lord Thrappler, and is titled, Creepy Furry Tries to Make an Animal Harem. Turns out he brings his kink into every game. A while ago I had a young lad join a homebrew game I was starting. Late teenage. I knew from pre-screening players that he wasn't a big role player due to nerves. I said it wasn't a problem and he would have plenty of opportunity to practice. He told me that he played in 6 other games throughout the week. I thought he really wanted to learn how to roleplay. He wanted to play Rasher, a druid. Grew up in the woods with animals, left to find the source of sickness in nature, standard stuff, standard backstory. Now, there were a lot of situations that made me wonder about the player, but weren't severe enough for me to warrant his exclusion from the group. I stamped down on that behavior early on, so it was present, but not big enough to be construed as bad behavior. However, he made the other players wonder about him for a while. Such incidents include wanting to breed wolves and dolphins to make a hybrid sea wolf army to conquer the seas, and hints that he may have to get involved in order to teach them how to cross species effectively. Trying to befriend a maddened gnoll actively trying to kill him while the party member he was stuck in a dungeon with was trying to figure out a puzzle to let them escape certain death. Trying to persuade the ranger's beast companion to be besties with him instead of the other player character. Attempting to breed with a tiger whilst wild-shaped as another tiger in order to subdue it for petterization. Being disinterested and blunt in roleplay, unless it involved animals. Not helping the party in combat so that he can befriend animals around like birds and such. Sending pics of cute animals unprompted in the Discord server during games when animals were not the topic. One session brought it all to a head. I had brought this homebrew world for the party, and a lot of lore for them to explore and discover. They found a homebrew artifact at the end of a long jungle dungeon that would change the dynamics of the game when they knew what it did. Rasher picks it up, and I give him the handout and said it's a long one, so we'll come back to Rasher as the player reads it and realizes what it is. We roleplay with the rest of the group for about 10 minutes before turning back to Rasher, thinking he'll understand the gravity of the item. Turns out he hadn't read it in all that time because he was looking at animal pics. Note, I'm fairly certain he meant furry prawn. Me. Okay, no problem. It is very important, so do you want to give it to someone else? Rasher.
No, it's mine. I'll read it.
Me. Righto, we'll do a little bit more roleplay as you read then. 10 minutes later, me. Rasher looks a little white in the face as she stares off at this green staff. Rasher.
Oh, it does some stuff and has something to do with the world. I didn't really pay attention.
Me. Annoyed and cheeringly sarcastic. That doesn't matter. It's just lore stuff. You don't really care about the world, do you? You just like animals. Ha ha ha. Rasher.
Yeah.
Me. Wait, so you don't care about the time and energy I spend making this game for you? Rasher.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll read it and be interested in it, okay?
Me. You should want to be interested in it, not because you were told to. Anyways, I'm annoyed but carry on with the game, but his lack of respect and interest has soured me a little. So after the game, I reach out to the players in his other groups to see what he was like with them. I genuinely thought it was my issue to resolve as I wasn't reaching him as a DM. Turns out they're all sick of his behavior, trying to derail games with his animal antics. And yes, he does try to have relations with them. However, their DMs do nothing about it, and it is killing the other player's interest in said game. He also tries to kill steal for XP, hog all the loot, and do his own thing regardless of plans in said games. Stuff I noticed but stopped pretty early. It was like all the minor things for me were dialed up to 11 in the other games. So I speak to my players and they are unanimously tired of his awkwardness and poorly veiled fetish. I tell him straight up that I'm removing him not because of issues in my game, but because of his behavior in other games. I would not let a toxic player take a spot in my games when I could be playing with so many others who don't even have one game. He never responded. The game is currently great, and all the players are happier. TLDR, player is obsessed with animals to the detriment of his party. He is the same in all of his games, so I removed him to make my players feel more comfortable. End of story. Well, it seems only fitting that Slanesh would be represented by a scion of the furry community. We haven't had a furry story pop up in a while, so I'm gonna go ahead and count that as a sign that they've finally integrated into society in a way that's not so horrific. That or they're plotting something. Well, regardless of that existential nightmare, let's talk about this story. Animals are very close to my own heart. Outside of the whole being a D&D YouTuber thing, animal science is what I consider to be my reason for living. Hell, the reason I play Tyranids is because the idea of weaponizing evolution on a cosmic scale tickles the tism in a way that few things can. I have a whole second channel I've called Happy Bara where I exclusively talk about animal science. I'm gonna be uploading there again pretty consistently real soon, so keep an eye out. All that considered, it's not hard to see why a sickness that would upset Nurgle coupled with a rage that would overwhelm Korn starts flowing through my veins whenever I hear tales about people viewing animals in a way that goes beyond a healthy appreciation. I'd rather have the dude who smeared shit on the walls in my gaming group, because at least with that guy, the night isn't guaranteed to end with me in the back of a cop car. Fun fact, but pigs are opportunistic omnivores and can and will eat anything they can chew. And 16 of them can reduce a 200-pound corpse to nothing in only 8 minutes, which is one of the rare facts perpetuated by Hollywood that's actually true. Plus, some rare wild hogs can grow up to be half a ton, so it's not out of the realm of possibility for them to overpower and consume a man while he's still alive. Completely unrelated to the events of this story, but I've been considering adding pig farming to my list of hobbies. Anyone know where I can get a good deal on slop and barley? On a lighter note, I'm a pretty big fan of how this DM took a no-nonsense approach to prioritizing the health of his game and the comfort of his players. That's something to be admired. Sometimes it's just way too easy to ignore massive red flags for the sake of just keeping the peace. It's a pretty common reaction just to suffer in silence because you don't want to rock the boat, and just assume that everyone else is doing fine, while they are also suffering in silence. It's okay to make your feelings heard, because even if you are the only one who feels a certain way about a certain topic, at least you don't have to put in all that effort into hiding it. In fact, it was the players finally speaking up and telling the DM point blank, "This guy is creeping us the f*** out," that finally led to a scenario where they can sit and play D&D without it feeling like a furry hostage situation. So yeah, if your D&D game feels like it's something you gotta do at gunpoint because of of one guy, then it's probably more than likely that you're not the only one who feels the same. And one night of potential drama is gonna be so much better than potential months of silent suffering. But you know who probably also goes through long hours of suffering? The artists who send me fan art. That's right, let's take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art comes from viewer Cyrilk, who depicts the Drake poised to engage in combat with his most hated enemy. Look, I know no one questioned why the IRS spent $35 million on military-style equipment, but maybe y'all will start listening now that they have whole-ass androids. Hey, yeah, the sink's in the back. Hey, you're not the repair guy.
Correct. I am Tax Obot. Give me your money.
Haha! You fool! I have no money! All of it's either tied up in the market or donated to charity for the write-off. I played your game and you lost.
You are sitting on a giant pile of gold.
Would you believe me if I said it was all uncashed Bitcoin?
No.
Thank you again, Cyrilk, for submitting your art. If you'd like to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section, or upload it to the official Den of the Drake subreddit, linked in the description. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and send in your fan art. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. Also, buy my plushie. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.